In 1985, I was actually in a task force called Patrol Bureau Task Force, headed by a Sergeant Bruce Maravich, and we were tasked with the Night Stalker series. And man, I remember he was just a pure evil person. I remember when we would get the briefings on what he did to his victims and to children, and there wasn't and there were some pretty tough cops in that unit. And I can tell you, when we were home, most if not all of us still living in the city, everybody had a gun in their sweatpants, and we all lived in the kind of houses, and we lived west of Twin Peaks, and that's where he did the homicide that put him on the radar here in San Francisco.
Can you talk about that homicide, when it was and where it was in the
Right.
timeline of his capture?
It was late summer of '85, and he killed a gentleman out by Lake Merced in that tract. And a great criminalist here in the city, Larry DeBoer, actually figured out that whoever did that homicide was the same guy that did a burglary in the marina. And I don't know if this is common knowledge, but the way that the case was made was, and only here in San Francisco, is an officer, Dan Falzone, whose father, Frank Falzone's pretty storied homicide inspector here in the city, worked the Zodiac case and had the Night Stalker case, I believe at the time. His son was in the FDO program, or a real new officer, and he took the burglary report in the marina. So he was conscientious enough to write down all the information on the property taken. And again, this is all from memory. So as the story goes, Richard Ramirez gave a piece of this jewelry to a girlfriend over in the East Bay. I think it was Elsa Bronte. And at that point in time, the mom didn't like him. There was something wrong about him, which would be the understatement of all time. And somehow it was matched up so that it matched the burglary in the marina. And Larry DeBoer had already made it proof positive whoever did that burglary was in fact the Night Stalker. And the posters that then came out that day, that when were all over the state, including in Southern California when he was arrested, and officers, myself included, were deployed over actually to the East Bay, because we believed that he was going to come back either to this residence in El Sobrante, or I believe it was Albany, and we actually got called off from the residence that he was taken into custody in Southern California. And then later, we'd run across him from time to time on the 6th floor, and I can tell you, there was just something about him. And I mean, I've been around plenty of scary people, but boy, you would see him. I know Maravich himself saw him and said he had never seen deader eyes in his life. This guy, we're a better place to not have him here anymore.
You remember that crime scene? Were you ever there?
No, I wasn't at the homicide scene. I was actually, like I said, in the unit that followed it up. The regular officers at Terraville Station would have done that investigation. But just as recently as 2009, they got a DNA match on another homicide that he did that we didn't even know about in '84, where he killed a 9-year-old little girl in the Tenderloins. So again, if it's ever been a case of addition by subtraction, it's good that this guy's gone.
And what was your task on the task force? What were you doing? I mean, you were helping out with the investigation?
Yeah, well, we were all young back then, so it was our job to get him. So we had firsthand knowledge of all of his modus operandi, how he would commit his crimes, the structures that he liked. I remember being put out in the neighborhoods all night long where he committed the homicide. And a couple times, one time in particular, this poor residential burglar was out there, and he didn't know that we were all out there. He got arrested for the burglary, but it didn't go well. So.
How long was he in the Bay Area compared to Southern California, and at what point of his killing career, if you will?
Yeah,
well,
can you talk about his Bay Area ties and what brought him
right.
there? What
So he had a girlfriend in the East Bay, and so there was that. And then again, nobody knew that he was here in '84, other than anecdotally through other relationships, until we got the DNA test that he killed the little girl in '84, and apparently he had been staying in the Tenderloin. and then, of course, he does the homicide in 85. So for certain, we know that he was in Northern California in 84 and 85 and at least had some romantic interest in the East Bay.
And then went to Southern California and did killings there?
Well, the homicides that he had killed, again, because we didn't know about 84 till 2009, had actually worked their way up from Southern California in the valley and the like. But I mean, I believe he when he was ultimately convicted, I think he had 12, 13, 14 counts of homicide that he was convicted for.
Was he known as the Night Stalker when,
Yeah, that's what we called him.
really, before the Lake Merced event?
All I know is, I mean, we knew him as the Night Stalker long before we ever knew him as Richard Ramirez.
So he was here in the Hall of Justice in jail up here?
Yeah, he was on the 6th floor.
And why was that? Wasn't he tried down in LA?
Well, yeah, but then they brought him up here and tried him for his crime up here, and then, of course, he's been over at San Quentin, and, he today passed at Marin General.
Can you recall or recount the crime that he committed here, the murder he committed here?
I don't know the details of that. I wasn't there. I was working nights at the time, and not west of Twin Peaks. Most of the time we were east of Twin Peaks or out in the southeast section. We were like a violence reduction team, but when there would be a series like this or another big case we worked, there was an Embarcadero rapist, they would mobilize the 30 of us and just put us wherever.
But the victim was from San Francisco, or?
Yeah, the victim was from San Francisco, an Asian man, and it was from out by Lake Merced.
Well, he was never prosecuted, was he, for anything up here? Is that correct? I mean,
He was charged.
he was charged but not prosecuted for the Pam murder?
I don't know that particularly. I mean, again, I wasn't a principal officer in that homicide investigation. We were more charged with making sure that he didn't get off and get to do something else. And to this day, we don't know that he ever did before he was arrested.
He terrorized the LA area for a while. Was there the same sense of dread about him up here, or was it just sort of a smaller?
Yeah, he scared me. And so I actually have had conversations since with Sergeant Maravich, and Bruce he's a giant guy. He's 6'2", 275 guy, and I mean he would tell you all day long that he was a guy that if you saw him and you just saw him, you just knew that there was something wrong.
And Maravich was the principal investigator in the Bay Area?
He was the leader of the Patrol Bureau Task Force that was charged, this plainclothes cadre of officers, with saturating neighborhoods that we thought that he might come back to make sure that he didn't get off again.
Is he still on the job?
No, he's retired now.
Chief, what went through your mind when you heard that he had died this morning?
I guess, I know it's probably not right, but I was happy.
So when you were saturating those neighborhoods, did you get that sense of fear? I mean, you said you were scared, but did you get that sense among those residents who lived in those neighborhoods?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, again, growing up in San Francisco, I remember as a little kid, we were scared of the Zodiac, we were scared of the zebra. There's been some other times when you were scared of different people that didn't have the standing, but as an adult, and certainly as an adult police officer, he would be at the top of my list as, when I'm living in San Francisco, that was a scary time here in the city, those 6 months that he was out and about or worried to be out and about in 85.
You saw people really closing their windows and...
Oh yeah, I mean, it was, in fact, if you go back to old news stories, there were tips on make sure your windows are locked. He gains access through grounds floor windows that are left open. And it was the summer, so, I mean, it's not balmy here in the city. But, I mean, there's not a lot of air conditioning in San Francisco, and people are told, keep your windows locked. If you have a dog, put your dog out. I mean, it was a very, very anxious time here in San Francisco.
So Chief, you've been a cop for a long time, and you've seen lots of stuff, but you say you were scared of this guy. What was it about him when you saw him up close? Was it sociopath? What was it about him?
I'm telling you, just I think Bruce's description of just the dead eyes. I mean, I remember being on the 6th floor one time walking to do an interview where they keep a lot of the suspects that are awaiting trial, and he was sort of in the window, just standing there like it was a picture window. And one of my brother officers almost jumped into my arms and said, "Jeez, can you imagine finding that guy in your closet?" So, I mean, I'm telling you, he was, again, if you looked up evil in the dictionary, I think there might be a picture of Richard Ramirez there.
And again, the connection was,
Never met her.
the connection was made here, that, you mean you ended up, you linked the burglary with the killing here in San Francisco, but did you have a picture and then get a name?
Yes. So again, the way that this criminalist Larry DeBoer, who did the processed the crime scene of the burglary in the marina and the homicide scene out by Lake Merced, was positive that the same person committed both crimes. Some of the property, one of the officers, Officer Dan Falzon, who later went to the FBI, was conscientious enough that he wrote down in the incident report, because we didn't have the crime data warehouse back then. He wrote down all the numbers that were all on the jewelry or whatever, and then as the story goes, Ramirez gave a piece of this stolen jewelry to a girlfriend. The mom didn't like it, looked at it, saw the number, figured it was stolen, reported that to the police. It got cross-checked. It came back to one of the pieces of property from the burglary, which gave us the knowledge that Richard Ramirez, that came up in AFIS, the computer system for fingerprints, and the picture went out, and he was taken into custody within days of that.
Do you think he did more than he was, he was convicted of 13, I think, down in mostly Southern California. I don't think he was convicted for anything up here, but I've read some accounts where he was certainly being looked at for several other things. Do you think he did even more than he was ever convicted for?
Well, I mean, I don't think you ever want to say, they say never say never. I mean, I think with a serial criminal like this, sex offender, pretty much women, children, men, satanic bent, the whole thing, where as recently as 2009, we're still attributing murders to this guy. It's quite possible that long now after he's gone, we're still finding evidence of his crimes.
You said that Larry DeBoer processed the marina scene and the homicide scene and was positive from what he saw at both scenes that the same person did it. Do you know what he saw? What caused him to link those two together?
Well, again, he took, footprints, fingerprints. He was just a really good criminalist. And, those guys, they get their information, they process it, but he could say to a virtual certainty that the suspect was the same.
So it wasn't MO, it wasn't intuition.
Oh, no. It was
his
physical.
footprint.
Right.
His
Physical
footprint.
evidence.
Got it.
Physical evidence from both scenes were clear and convincing that it was the same suspect.
And is it safe to say now that he's dead, not that he was being of any help while he was alive, but if he had committed any other crimes here, that finding these that's done, or not necessarily something could pop up like it did with the child?
No, I mean, we continue. There's no statute of limitations on homicide, and all these cases continue to be worked. And I think that anybody that ever lost a loved one would like to know ultimately what the final disposition was and to get closure. So we'll continue to work all these cases, and who's ever responsible, if they're alive, we'll do everything we can to bring them to justice. And if they're not, we'll make sure the family knows what we know.
What happened
One
with
more.
the 2009 match? I'm just curious with the family, did that bring them some closure? Do you recall what happened?
I don't know that. I just know that we made that case, and I'm sure that the family was contacted and that they know.
Chief, can I ask you a question, unrelated story, actually about the bank robberies we've been seeing. Can you talk about your concern about these type of violent takeovers and whether you all feel you're getting close to helping resolve this with the aid of the FBI?
Right. So obviously, whenever we have a bank robbery, any kind of a series, we work it. Obviously, we're very happy we don't have ones like we just discussed, but we work closely with the FBI. We have a tremendous solve rate on bank robberies. Also, there's a lot of technology involved, so we're very, very hopeful that before somebody gets hurt, then we're going to get those responsible.
Great. Thank you very much, folks.
Good clues coming up with it?
At the risk of going into what we know already, we're hopeful.
And Chief, the timeline on that, he was up here after, he was brought up here after he was arrested in Southern California to be interviewed about cases up here? Is that
Yes.
correct? So that's when you saw him?
Yes.
Okay.
But never,
Or after his trial anyway.
No, you know what, I don't really, I just know that I came across him on the 6th floor. I don't know as to time whether, because sometimes they move him back and forth.
Was he given a face and name up here, or did they ID him down there?
He was ID'd up here.